I'm Megan. For those of you who don't know who I am, I wanted to introduce a very special group of people here today who are going to be sharing a project that they had done actually in a very short amount of time. For those of you who didn't know, actually our FutureLaw week kicked off this weekend. We started with a boot camp on Saturday, and then we actually on Sunday ran a hackathon, one of our biggest yet. We had 600 registrations and about 400 people attend in person. There were 80 projects that were submitted, and today, alongside my esteemed colleague Jay, we are so proud of the Stanford team that has actually won the 5th LLM X Law Hackathon, GovMatch. So they will be pitching and sharing what they've built today.
We are GovMatch, and we are building multi-agent AI and AI-powered search to help small to medium-sized businesses win government contracts. This is our team. We're a group of Stanford MBAs, law students, and computer science experts with experience in machine learning engineering, government contracting, big law, and big tech. And I want you to meet Kara. She's the CEO of a small business working in environmental remediation and disaster relief. But she spends more time applying for government contracts than actually doing the work that she loves. Why? Government, for anyone who's worked with government, can be really, really painful to work with. These opportunities, they're scattered across multiple opaque sources. Each RFP has its own unique requirements, sometimes numbering hundreds of pages long, and also crafting an application that actually win this RFP, that can take days, sometimes weeks.
And just like Kara, there are thousands of business owners that have the exact same problem. They cannot find the right opportunities for their businesses to grow. Last year alone, the US government spent over $2 trillion in government contracting. 24% of this amount, nearly $480 billion, is reserved for small, medium businesses. The problem, however, is that these opportunities are very hard to find and are harder to handle. That's where GovMatch comes in.
So we built a platform that helps match small businesses with RFPs for which they're eligible, and then helps you write the proposals. So to do that, we used AI-powered semantic search to scrape government websites and figure out what you're actually qualified for. And then we used a multi-agent architecture to build out a proposal, and we'll go into the details of that shortly, so that by the time you actually look at what we've produced for you, you're not wasting your valuable human time. So if you'd like to check us out and follow along, you can view our demo at govmatch.vercel.app. I will qualify that it is not optimized for mobile, so it's much better on your computers. But so if we go to the front end that we built out, you can see that this is intended to be a platform for you as a small business owner to basically consolidate where your money's coming from. So to that end, I'd highlight two things. The first is this opportunity matching, which Angelique can tell us about.
Right, and so as we've mentioned, these RFPs are often opaque and therefore misleading. For example, a hospital that is looking for medical equipment might actually just be looking for light bulbs. And as an electrician, that's an opportunity that you would otherwise miss out on. So for that reason, we scrape these government websites and extract all the information relevant to an RFP, which allows us to perform the semantic search against any given business and curate a set of matches that match the business's offerings.
And then having found all of these additional opportunities for you, we basically figured out, how do we actually write out this proposal for you? This is a really attractive opportunity for multi-agent architectures for a couple of reasons. One, it's a pretty nonlinear process to write out one of these government proposals that needs to be coherent across the entire document and reference a whole bunch of different materials. And so for that reason, a multi-agent architecture becomes really attractive. The way that we built it out was 8 stages. So we have different agents that are covering different stages of this, including intake, so to make sure that all of the information from the request for proposal is reflected, as well as all the information that's available about your business. We're including things like previous proposals that you've written so that we ensure coherence across your business's actual competencies. We're thinking about eligibility to ensure that we've maintained alignment with the RFP, with what the RFP is actually looking for. And then you'll see actually only the 4th agent is the drafting agent, and subsequent ones are involved in review to ensure not only that we've written a well-aligned proposal, but also one that's a persuasive proposal. So again, by the time you look at it, that you're looking at something that's actually worth spending your time on. So if you go to govmatch-demo.vercel.app, you'll be able to navigate towards our GitHub, which has one of the proposals that we wrote out. This was in response to a 60-page document from a small town in, I believe, North Carolina for debris recovery, something. And you can dig through, and it actually does kind of a decent job with what we were asking it to do. So we think in terms of proof of feasibility, we think we actually hit it. There's still a lot more work to be done, and for all of the nerds in the audience, we have detailed output logs so that you can see what was going on a bit under the hood. And again, obviously this is on our GitHub, so you can dig through what the actual architecture looks like. With that, I'll hand it back to Summer.
One final note before we move to Q&A. One question you may be asking is, why now? And as the government scales back its own workforce and cuts these contracts with these big consulting firms, this is actually a unique opportunity for small to medium-sized businesses to come in. And in fact, you'll notice that many of the small contracts are the ones that are still being kept. And so if these businesses can come in now, they can actually potentially get these sticky, recurring sources of revenue that can help grow their business to the next level. At the same time, new technology is making it cheaper and easier for these small to medium-sized businesses to compete. And this was an awesome proof of concept for us. We're really excited about this, and we're exploring whether we should build this to the next level. And so we'd really welcome any feedback, questions, advice, connections, or people that you think we should talk to. So please do reach out. And with that, we'll take some questions.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Have you considered, I know this is early, but have you considered doing this kind of thing for nonprofits, trying to help them find appropriate places to get funding, especially as government funding dries up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this tool fundamentally is one for finding opportunities and writing great responses. And if you've worked with nonprofits, you know some of these grant proposals are also very long, convoluted, painful, and require specific formatting. And that's what our product is designed to solve. So right now, we've started looking at government RFPs because a lot of the data is publicly available, and it's easy to sort of build a solution around that. But absolutely, we could totally work with nonprofits, and that's one area that we're really interested in exploring further is the grant space.
And to that end, that was something that I spent part of my previous life doing, was writing some of these grant proposals, and oh my God, are they painful.
Team, I don't think a lot of people in here may actually have ever been to a hackathon. Can you describe the timeline that you operated on from idea to product? And then also tell us about how you how did you validate the outputs to know that it's actually as good as you think it is?
So the way that the timeline for this hackathon worked was we had a wonderful boot camp hosted by Megan and Jay that started about 9 a.m. on Saturday. And we were a randomly grouped team that turned out to be wonderful. But we kind of started ideating in earnest at around 1:30 on Saturday. And if you look at the GitHub commits, you can see how late we were up on Saturday night, and it's pretty brutal. And then we submitted this on Sunday. So again, this is all very much, as you alluded, this is proof of feasibility. We actually think it could work. In terms of some of the validation, it's mostly been pretty ad hoc at this stage. There isn't kind of a benchmark against which we can test the veracity and persuasiveness of RFPs. But so this was kind of more of a top level. Did it address the requirements in the RFP that we were looking at? Things like that, and we think that there's still quite a bit of work to do, but we were surprised at the coherence with which the outputs included the information that we gave and avoided hallucinations, which was kind of the main thing, naturally, that we were concerned about. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd say that in the future, one thing that we'd look at is with FOIA requests, you can get a pretty good database of winning RFP responses. And we were able to even find some just from Google searching. And that could be a great way to train our AI to write great responses. Is hey, we can look at the RFP. We can look at all the responses that government got. Of course, some are redacted. And we can identify the winning one. And that way, we can actually deliver a really, really great response based on all this past data, based on your company's proprietary info, and generate something that, when you're looking at it, doesn't actually take much more work from your end.
First of all, terrific job. This is amazing. I was thinking, how would you, if you were to commoditize this, charge for this type of application?
We have thought about two main models. One would just be like a SaaS subscription model, maybe to define the opportunities, and then potentially even contingency fees. Like if you win this contract, could we take a % of what you won? And that would be something that would be really cool, actually, particularly as we can get into like better contracts, bigger ones, and also demonstrate that our interests are aligned with yours.
And then a second question, do you see this applicable to other scenarios outside of governmental contracting?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to go?
I think certainly the nonprofits is a very analogous setting, but fundamentally what this is doing, right, is there's a layer of scraping for opportunities and finding alignment between two sources of information and then producing something that kind of is the happy marriage of both of those things, right? So you almost fear to think of it as job applications given the state of the current job market or something, but truly it's a very analogous kind of information contextualizing type of problem. But we're very open to any suggestions we have. Also, if you have any suggestions on how we might monetize it. But
any kind of
great question.
RFP process where
Yeah.
perhaps you've got a corporate legal department putting out an RFP to big law and asking for proposals. Usually that ends up in kind of a reverse auction. But, you know, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into responding to that RFP before you even qualify for putting your numbers out there for the auction. So I'm just thinking there could be a matchmaking there somewhere down the road.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for the suggestion.
And just to have, like, the product is not only specific to a jurisdiction, right? The technology can be expanded to other jurisdictions, so we are thinking of that as well, because RFPs are not exclusive only to specific jurisdictions, so we are kind of thinking applying it not only to the US, but other countries as well. Yeah.
In the kind of current administration, like the likelihood that different departments of government are likely to use like Grok in the future to screen. I'm curious if you guys think there would be a competitive advantage now to start gaming Grok to see how Grok would likely respond so that you would always filter to the top by the time that those get implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're in a really interesting moment now in government, and to avoid any of the politics of it, but we think like this is a moment if you can figure out how the new rules of the system might work. For example, if they are using Grok, if they're going to be using more advanced AI tools in screening different applications, we too can use these tools, and we can figure out with our agents like how to give you the best shot of success. And one thing we'd really like to do is like once you have your company information uploaded, give you a % probability of success for even just like considering the contract based on what we know of what the government's looking for. Anything else, folks would add?
Hey guys, congrats again. I know we hung out at the boot camp, so it's cool to see you guys up here. What data sources did you guys end up using? I know there were conversations about different ones, and I'm curious what you guys landed on and what that process was like, because this data is not, it's public, but it's not exactly easy to scrape. So yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, so we scraped, for this project, we looked at a bunch of sources, and then we ended up settling on 2 just because of our time constraints. So one of them is sam.gov, which is nationwide, and then we also looked at a California one. And the scraping processes for both of those were very different. sam.gov has sort of a very transparent API that anyone can sign up for, whereas the California one was just straight up like reading the JavaScript. And so, yeah, that's a potential area that we'll have to look at for how difficult these websites are to like wrangle. But most things are scrapable at this point.
Do you have a plan of if you were to, let's say, go scale to other types of government projects, use the same sources or do something else in your data strategy?
So it's interesting because we did a very brief competitive analysis given our timing, but it seemed like there were a lot of people working in federal contracting. but not so much looking at state and local. And we think with all these new tools that make it easier than ever to scrape information, parse them, and process them, this is actually a great opportunity. Like, we can get information from all sorts of states, all sorts of counties and municipalities, all sorts of cities, put them all together in one place, so that for a small business, you can actually look for the wide range of opportunities in your area. And in terms of actual strategy for doing that, I think it would be really dependent on each particular city. But perhaps what we do is we'd start with some of the biggest sources of government RFPs and then move down from there.
Well, I'd love to see how you guys tackle it going forward. Congrats again.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more quick question. Sorry. Did you guys look at alternative models? Like, did you compare the output of Claude and ChatGPT or or did you just use one, I presume, because of the time constraints, and there might be differences in the way different models respond?
So we went ahead with the OpenAI API for under the hood of the multi-agent architecture and did not compare against Claude or didn't use Gemini, which, I mean, Gemini just got back on the scene, right? No, we didn't. But I think it would be really interesting to do kind of a comparative analysis for having a framework like this. And I mean, something we need to be realistic about is OpenAI's deep research sufficient to do this now? And I would argue not really, in part because of context windows, in parts because of the linearity with which it approaches things. And it does de facto have an agent architecture for how deep research works under the hood, but we don't think it was as good, but we definitely need to do more validation and more quantitative evaluation of what that looks like. Thank you for the question.